Howdy everybody, David Minkin here, starting player with Connect More, and welcome to another edition of Avoid the Rules, a video of instruction and demonstration that helps ease rule understanding and learning. Easy start. Now what wonderful game do I have laid out here in front of me that I'm going to talk to you about? It's Snowdonia by Tony Boydell. Now Snowdonia is a game that plays 1 to 5 players, and that's in fact one of the key reasons why I've decided to make this video, is because I know this game has been out for a couple of years and there's loads of videos and there's loads of other information out there. So why on earth do I want to make a video, and what do I feel that I'm actually adding to the already abundant items that are out there on the blogosphere and Board Game Geek, etc. Well, I've felt really inspired to do this video because at the end of 2014 I decided to do the solo challenges actually inside the box here. And basically what the solo challenge is you have to play 7 different games of Snowdonia, and each game you actually use a different train, or have the ability to use a different train within that particular game. And I did that, and that for me was one of the most rewarding gaming experiences I had in 2014, which is a little bit shocking because I game for the people, for what goes on up here, not necessarily what goes on down here on the table. But I had such an enjoyable time doing that. It was a nice quiet time for me to actually play through this game solo, that I just really enjoyed it and really brought to life a lot of elements of this game, and for that reason I felt compelled to do a video. So I hope that you enjoy the video. I go through a fairly detailed explanation of how to play it. If you're already familiar with how to play it and maybe a little bit more curious about how to do the solo, or what my feelings are about the solo experience, that will be at the end in my final thoughts. So without any further ado, let's just jump right into this game. Let's learn how to play it, because frankly speaking, I'm going to give you a spoiler alert, there's nothing about this game that I don't like, and I hope that I can show you why and particular elements of this game that really make it shine for me, because this after all is a worker placement train game. And if I told you that right from the beginning, you might be like, oh okay, I've got a lot of worker placement games, another train game, okay, tell me something new. Well, there are some really neat wrinkles in this game that I really like that make this game shine, and for me it's just one of my favorites. I really enjoy this as a worker placement game, and there's some neat push your luck and some neat timing mechanisms that occur within this game. So let's get started. This is Snowdonia, set up for a 3-player game, pink, yellow, and blue. And I mention that because the setup will be different depending on the number of players that are actually playing. Now this game can play 1 to 5 players, and there are going to be some differences of how you set things up. I'll try to highlight those differences throughout the video. Now let's talk a little bit about what it is that you're looking at here before we dive right into the rules. To start, we have the main game board here in the center of the table. Now this board represents the heart of the game. This contains the core mechanisms and mechanics and the majority of the information that you're going to use throughout the game to drive your decisions and your strategy to hopefully drive yourself to victory. Now I'm going to talk about how to win the game here in a brief moment, but before I do that, I also want to talk around the board. We also have all of these cards that lay out, and this essentially represents the train track that you're going to build. You're going to start at the base of the Snowdon Mountain here, which is also represented here on the main board, and I really like that because it's such a prominent image here on the board, and they didn't clutter it up with a lot of stuff, so you can see it at any time throughout the gameplay. It helps me feel immersed into the theme, into the game. And you start down here at this train station, so you have station cards and track cards. This would be a station card. You start here and you are going to work your way up the mountain, and you're going to clear rubble. You're going to clear earth, which are represented by cards like this with rubble on them. And once you have done that, then you can actually start building track. And here you actually see a train track. So that's pretty cool, because then as the game goes on, you're going to see this track being built from the base of the mountain in a clockwise way all the way up to the very top of the mountain. And you also see peppered in amongst these track cards are what are referred to as station cards. So we're going to be building little stations as we go up on the mountain. And it's really cool how they've got this set up, because since the core of the game is here on the board and the configuration of the track and the stations is represented here by cards, it opens itself up to a whole lot of different variations and expansions. And in fact, there's a bunch. I believe there's 8 out now because it's a lot easier just to print off a new deck that will work for a different configuration of a train track, and you'll be going up a different mountain, but the actual core itself has remained the same. And in that way, it's really opened itself up to a lot of interesting replayability while maintaining the core of the game. So I think that's really quite neat. So that's the game set up right there. And off to the side here, you'll notice I also have a lot of these little different train cards set up, and we have some other little tokens here as well. This is the supply, and these train cards are going to be available to the different players at some point during the game. Now, when you do the setup with the train cards, there are 7 train cards in the game. You randomly take one and remove it from the game as well. And they have different special abilities, so depending on what your strategy might be, one train might be more useful to you than another. And we'll talk about that later. So we briefly reviewed what you're looking at, but now the next burning question is, well, how the heck do you win? Well, what's really cool about this game, I love it when games do this, it provides a really nice end game scoring summary card here for you, and on the other side is a little setup for on the different player numbers that I was mentioning earlier in the video, how you're going to do different setups depending on the number of players that are playing. But let's go back to the end game scoring. Now, because it is end game scoring, there will be no points scored throughout the actual course of the game. All of the points are scored at the very end of the game. And the points are pretty easily indicated anytime you actually see a symbol like this with a little orange box with the corners cut out with a number in it. That represents the number of victory points that is going to be worth at the very end of the game. So the next obvious question is, well, how do I score points? Well, it's going to be quite easy to explain because there are in fact only 5 categories that are actually going to score points at the very end of the game. And I think the easiest way to talk about what's going to score you points is to go through each one of these spaces that you see here on the top of the main board, because this represents the worker placement area. And you'll notice that each of these spaces are lettered from A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. The other thing you're going to notice is that within each lettered area, there is typically some small squares that are numbered within that area. Now, those are the squares where you can actually assign your laborers to. Now, once those squares have been filled up by people assigning them, then nobody else can actually take that action within that area. You'll notice that the exception is over here in G, and this is actually move your surveyor, which we'll talk about, and there are no squares in that area. That means you can take as many people as they want to can go in there at any time throughout the game. Now, once these squares are filled up, then nobody else can place them for that round. And above these squares, you're also going to notice some white numbers. Those white numbers represent how many players can actually play with this current configuration. So for example, if we look at the lettered area B, we'll see that 1 to 3 players can play in this configuration. If you have 4 to 5 players, then you just simply look and you find a card that says 4 to 5 up here, and then you would just simply put that on top there, and you see that it's added a third area for a laborer to be placed. So this is one of the ways that this game scales very nicely from 1 to 5 players by modifying how many areas are available for laborers to be placed for all of the players. So let's start with lettered area A, and we can work our way through to G, and in doing so, I'm going to show you all the ways that you'll be able to score points at the end of the game. Now, the order in which these actions are laid out is very significant because this is in fact the same order in which the actions will be carried out once all of the laborers or workers have been placed in any one of these spots up here. So action A will go first, followed by B, and so on and so forth, and finally G will be the last action to be carried out. And within each of these action areas, the worker that's placed on the spot indicated with the lower number 1 would go before the worker with the number 2. So there is some jockeying for position that's going to occur as you're placing your laborers out on the board. So for example, if it's pink, he gets to go, he might put his worker here, then yellow might go here, and so on and so forth until everybody has laid out all of their laborers, again, which are indicated by these pawns. At that point in time, then you would start here with the A action, and you'd start with the number 1, and you would resolve each of the workers that have been placed in order from left to right and numerically within each one of these spots. So I hope that's clear. So I'll take these guys off real quick and I'll talk about each spot. So the very first thing that's going to be carried out is what's called the stockyard. Now there's 2 main things that are actually going to occur in this particular area. The first thing is this is a spot where you can actually get 3 of the 5 different resources that occur throughout this game. So this doesn't give you points directly, but it allows you to start building your engine. It allows you to start getting your different resources. So what you see here is is we have 3 different cubes. We have 2 of the cubes are colored orange and gray, which are these 2 resources, iron ore and stone. And the 3rd cube has all 3 of these colors. It has orange, gray, and black, which is black is the coal here. And what this simply means is per labor, per one of these pawns that's actually placed here, you can take any combination of resources you want that are available in one of these 3 spaces, but you're only allowed to take 1 coal. Now, coal is significant because this is a resource that is typically used to be able to buy or get an additional pawn to be able to use or labor to use on your turn and allow you to do more actions. But in order to do that, you'll need to acquire a train. So I'll talk about that in a little bit, but just keep that in mind. You'll also notice that down here on this spot 3, there's a little picture here of this black token, this wooden starter plane token. So you can actually make the choice to actually go last in this action, and in doing so you're going to get whatever scraps are left over. And so you see here the game starts with 7 iron ore, 4 stone, and 1 coal, and it's really nice and convenient because that's actually printed on the board for you to remember. And coal is going to be a hot commodity in this game, as are going to be other things depending on what people are trying to do. And it's really neat how that works, because sometimes you really want to be starting player because there's certain things that you need to get in, and like any worker placement game, people can block you out of key actions or key things that you want to do at key moments in the game, and you just want to go Arr! And sometimes you got to protect your strategy by becoming starting player, but that's at the expense of maybe not quite getting the resources you require. So that's what happens here in letter A area. Now we go over to letter B, and this is where you do excavation. And again, I'll focus your attention here on these cards that go around the board. And you'll notice that these cards at the start of the game, the ones with the little shovel up here, which is also in fact the same icon you see in letter B area, and it tells you how many rubble to basically put up on top of this card. These cards are randomly distributed around the board. The stations are at very particular areas. They tell you how many rubble cards to put beside them, but the rubble cards yourself, you shuffle them up and you mix them up. So this 4 and this 3, that's not predefined. It's just they got different values ranging anywhere from 2 all the way up to 5. Now what this means is you get to come here and you start digging the rubble out of this card. You get to take this rubble, and you'll actually, however many rubble that you clear, you'll actually be able to put into your play area. Now rubble does 2 things. There will be an action that will allow you to move to trade rubble for stone. So this is one way that you can acquire stone without having to go to the area A here, but it can also be used to score victory points at the end of the game, and that will come through the play of the contract cards, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Now, how much rubble do you actually get to clear? Now, this is another part of the game that I just really love, because you have over here, you see that there's a couple tracks here. This top track, again, we see that we have this shovel symbol. Again, the symbology is very consistent throughout the game. So we see the shovel symbol here, here, and here, and this stands for excavation. At the very beginning of the game, you see that we're going to have this little black disc, and we're going to put it right here on level 2. So this means that you will excavate. If you choose this action, you get to clear 2 of these rubble cubes off that card, and you get to take them into your playing area. Now, this excavation rate will change depending on the weather, which is going to be indicated here by these tokens, and that weather is going to be able to change your efficiency of your workers, your ability to go out and do work. And the weather comes in 3 different varieties. You're going to have sunny weather, which is here indicated with yellow, and that's going to improve the rate at which you're able to excavate, and also lay track, but I'll talk about lay track on the appropriate action. And then you also have rain on the mountain. That's actually going to make it more miserable for the workers to be out there. It's going to be tough on the mountain, and your rate will actually go down accordingly. And there's also going to be fog on the mountain. Fog is represented by a gray token, and this is indicated here on this card. This is what a foggy card looks like, but there's going to be a gray token on there, and that means there are certain actions that won't be available to you, and excavation is in fact one of those actions. So that would be blocked off if it's a foggy day on the mountain. And I'm going to talk about how the weather works, but just keep that in mind. So at any rate, at the very beginning of the game, you see that that we start here with an excavation rate at 2. If you were to go there, you're able to take 2 of these cubes off and add them to your area. But not only does this action give you the ability to earn rubble and gain it into your player area to perhaps trade for stone, as I mentioned, or to get victory points, but if you time this correctly, you may get victory points by clearing rubble from one of the station cards. So let me take a look at one of these station cards here. I'm going to just take all the rubble off. Whoops, it's flying all over the place. But if we take a look at one of these station cards, you can see that there are several different spaces on here. We have the non-excavation sites, which are down here, which are typically going to be stone or steel resources that you need to get victory points. But we also have, again, this shovel symbol up here, which stands for different excavation sites. So again, at the beginning of the game, I put 4 rubble cubes on this one and 2 rubble cubes on this one. But if we take a closer look, we say, woohoo, look at that. There's actually victory points associated with that. Now, what this means is, suppose that someone came along before us and we're clearing the rubble up, and the way that the rubble works is you must start at the base of the mountain and you have to work your way sequentially up. So first this card must be cleared, then this card must be cleared, then you work your way onto the station card where these excavation sites are. And these excavation sites basically just represent the track as is leading away from the actual station itself. And so what you see here is, suppose you come along and someone's already cleared off, say, 2 of these rubble cubes, and these 2 cubes are here, they haven't been taken yet, then, and if the excavation rate is 2, then by you clearing these 2 rubble cubes yourself, you see that there's no more rubble cubes left on this excavation site on the station. That means you timed it perfectly and you actually get to claim that as yours. So you will put this pink on there, or if you're provided your pink, or if you're whatever your player color is, but this is one of your ownership cubes, and this shows you and will remind you at the end of the game that you were the one that cleared that excavation site. And this is one of the things I really like about the game, because some people may say, well, what about the guy before you? He helped out too. Well, no, too bad, so sad. You were able to time that movement, time that placement accordingly so that you could get that. And this will also do another thing. Not only does this give you these immediate points, or not these immediate points, but these points at the end of the game, there will also be contract cards that will give you bonuses for amounts of spaces or areas complete on station cards, whether they be excavation spots or non-excavation spots. It just doesn't matter. So if you start building a lot on these different stations, then you might be able to be looking for some different contract cards that will give you a bonus at the end of the game for achieving a lot of these spots. So that's another really cool thing about the clearing rubble stage that you might want to keep in mind. Okay, so I put the rubble back onto the this first station here, and you'll see that this station itself is not unique in the fact that it's got excavation sites on it. You notice that all of these station cards always have 1 or 2 different excavation sites on them that you'll be able to be opportunistic about how you're going to do that. So let's move on to Action Area C. Now this is an area where you're actually going to upgrade your resources. And the 2 types of resources that can be upgraded in this game are the iron ore, or these orange cubes, and these can be upgraded to steel, these steel bars, and they're represented here by these black bars here. And you're going to need these to be able to lay track and also to complete some non-excavation sites on these different stations. And they're also required for actually building a train and maintaining your train, which we'll talk about. So you can do this trade, or you can also take some rubble. So again, suppose you had some rubble in your playing area, you can actually swap some rubble for some stone. And again, stone is typically most useful for building, again, some of these non-excavation sites on these stations. And so if you take this action, you're allowed to go up to 3 times, and you can trade 3 iron ore for a steel, and you can do that up to 3 times. You could trade 2 rubble for a stone, or you could do a combination of the 2. So for example, you could take 6 iron ore, trade it for 2 steel bars and 2 rubble, and trade it for 1 stone. And that's a maximum. You don't have to go up to 3 times. You can only do it once, or whatever you want. So that's just an area where you're going to upgrade your resources. Moving on to Action Area D. This is the space you go to lay track. And there's a few things we need to talk about when it comes to laying track. First off, to lay track is going to cost you 1 steel. That's the cost to lay down 1 track. But when it's your turn, where can you lay down the track? So again, you look at these cards that go around the outside of the board. You're starting to get familiar with them right now. And we go back to these cards here that have the rubble on them. On the back side of these cards, you'll notice that there's the track here. And you also notice that there's a number of victory points associated with laying track there. And the number of victory points on any of these cards for laying track is always going to be the same number of rubble that was on the back side of the card. So that way you always know what the value of the track is going to be. But in order to lay track, the cards that you're going to lay track on must be clear of rubble. If there is still rubble on a track card, you cannot lay track. You have not dug the trench, you have not blasted the mountain, you have not done the appropriate groundwork yet in order to be ready to actually lay the track. So if there's still rubble on these tracks, there's nothing you can do. You need to go through and clear the rubble first. And again, we're going to start at the bottom of the mountain. We're going to lay track in order up through the stations and around to finally get to the top. Now, the other thing that we need to remember when we're laying this track is that the amount of track that you're able to lay on your turn when you take this action is going to be dependent again on the weather. So here below the excavation rate that we pointed out earlier, we also have the amount of track that you're able to lay. There's a little scale here as well, and although there's 4 different boxes for you to move into, their 2 leftmost boxes are a level 1, so you can only lay 1 track when this little black cube or this black disc is in that area, and the 2 rightmost areas are 2. So you can either lay 1 or 2 tracks, and there are some bonuses, some different benefits when you get talking about these contract cards again, which may allow you to get +1, and that might allow you to get 3, for example, if the cube was already over here in a 2. But again, for both of these tracks, these cubes or these discs cannot go off the track one way or the other, so it's bounded up by both of these sides. But you're going to start the game with being able to lay track at a level 1, but with a sunny day you might be able to improve, or with a rainy day then your efficiency will go down for the same reasons for excavating as well. These guys, it's wet, their equipment is slippery, it's a little bit muddy out there, they're just not as efficient as they would be on a nice bright and sunny day. So in order to lay track, those rubble cubes may have to be off, and say for example you want to lay 1 track because the track rate is 1, you would just simply take this card and you'd flip it over, and you see there's a spot here again for one of your ownership cubes. So suppose yellow did that. Yellow could just put their cube right here and you put it down here. And again, that's to remind you at the end of the game that you will score those 4 victory points, but there are also bonus cards that may reward you for having certain numbers of track cards laid out, and that will remind you how many that you actually have. So laying track is a very important part of this game, but it is also affected by foggy days as well, just like excavation is. And when it's a foggy day, then you cannot take the lay track action and you cannot take the excavation action. So again, that goes back to watching this weather and trying to gauge your timing, not only against the players and where players are putting their labors in these spaces available, but against the weather. And it adds just that extra little wrinkle to an already really great game. Next we have Action Area E, and there are 2 different things you can actually do in this action area. The first thing you can do is you can actually build, and whenever you're talking about stations, there's always this little picture here, looks like a little hut, it looks like a little train station in fact, and you'll notice above all of the stations up where it has the name of the station, there's in fact that symbol as well. So if we look at a station card here, you see that there's that little symbol right there, and that's what's used throughout the game. The iconology is consistent, which again is really great within this game, and that indicates a station. So what this allows you to do is you can actually build on the station. So here you need to look at the non-excavation site. So again, you notice up here there's that shovel, that's what you would excavate, and that was this action area B. But now we're focusing on these areas down here. And this is really quite simple. Well, all it does is it tells you what resource you need and how many of them you need. So if you take this action, for example, and you have a steel bar, you can just simply take this steel bar, put it back into the supply there, and then you would say, suppose you're blue, you would just then simply put your ownership cube on there. This reminds you that you will get 7 victory points at the end of the game, but in addition you might have a bonus card that will give you bonuses for having so many different spaces built on station cards, whether they be excavation or non-excavation, it really doesn't matter. And it's just that simple, and you can see that all around there are all kinds of different things that can be built. But, and there's always a but, the exception here is you cannot build on any station card until all of the rubble has been cleared up to that station. There can be rubble still on that station card, it doesn't matter, but the rubble on all of the cards, these track cards going up to that station must be cleared. If there is even one piece of rubble, say for example, left on this card, nothing else can be built. And so if you took that action, it would be wasted because you could not actually build on here because you still need to work your way up to that station. So again, there's this progression that goes around the board that kind of pauses you sometimes or causes you to hesitate because you might want to take this action, you're ready to take that action, but you have to wait for the game to catch up, whether it be through different events, which I'm going to talk about, or through another player's actions, or sometimes you just got to take the bull by the horn and go for it just so that you can move ahead and keep your own engine going. So that's really quite neat. The second thing you can do here is you can actually buy a train. And this again goes back through here, and I'll just show you a train for example. So this, for example, is a number 4 train. And the way these cards are set up, it's always the same. First, it'll have the cost of the train in the upper left corner here. So this train will cost you 1 steel bar to actually buy. And typically the trains are 1 steel bar, and here's another one here. It will be 2 steel bars. So the train cards actually have their own individual prices on them. So you just check which train card you want. Then it'll either come with coal or no coal. So this particular train does not come with any coal. And you just look at the bottom right there. And then the rest of the trains, most of them either come with 1 coal. There's another one that comes with 2 coal. And at the beginning of the game, any train that comes with coal, you actually put that coal cube on there so that it's immediately available to you. Then after that, it shows you the benefits of the train. The first thing, for example, this particular card, the reason why I'm showing it is you see it has a +9 on there, and that's 9 victory points. That is what this train does. This train is a pure victory point train. At the end of the game, this train, if it is in your possession, will earn you 9 victory points. And that, in fact, is one of the 5 ways in which you can actually earn victory points on here. So this will be victory points only for 1 player, provided that some player throughout the game actually took that card. And again, this card may not have even made it into the game because it may have been the random one that was taken out. But the other cool thing about having trains is you'll notice most of them will have a little coal equals and a little pawn symbol on there. What this means is if you have a coal at the very beginning of the sequence where you're actually putting out your laborers, you can actually take that coal and you put it back into the resource bag, which I will talk about. You put it back into the resource bag and you get to take your 3rd laborer out from the pub. All this while, you see how there's these laborers, there's a laborer here in every color. They're just sitting in the pub having beers. They're waiting for you to hire them, to come and hire them. And the way that you're going to do that, first you need to get a train, and that train needs to give you the benefit of even being able to do that. And most of them do. At the end of that round, when you actually resolve the actions, that worker will actually go back to the pub. If you want him to come out and help you again in a further round, well then again you'll need to get some coal and then pay for that, provided you got the appropriate train, and then get that labor out again. So that also provides an awesome level of tension here because again the coal tends to be a very limited resource here, and if people are trying to get their additional worker out there, which is always a benefit when you're actually doing a worker placement game, the more workers then the more you can do, then there's going to be a lot of fighting and a lot of jockeying for position for these types of resources, so you can actually use the benefits of your train. And then there are also some of these trains have certain benefits that you're allowed to take during certain action areas. And so again, the cards are really nicely laid out here. This tells you that whenever you're taking the action in area C, which again we look through here, this is the area where you can actually upgrade your resources. It tells you that you can actually take 2 iron ore and trade it for a steel bar, as opposed to the usual exchange rate of using 3 iron ore. So that's the actual benefit for here. You're able to get steel bars for cheaper, but you'll notice it doesn't come with any coal. And it's also an expensive train to get. It's actually 2 steel bars as opposed to the other one I showed, which is 1 steel bar. Those trains allow you that flexibility to kind of change your strategy if things aren't quite working out, if you're not quite getting the different worker placement areas that you need, then maybe you can get a train that's going to help you and help your efficiencies a little bit more in doing different things. So it's definitely worthwhile to actually go through those trains and experiment with them and understand how it can bend and warp your strategies in this game. So I'll talk a little bit more about that with my solo playthrough kind of final thoughts. So that's action area E. Next we go to action area F, and this is the area where you can actually pick up one of these these contract cards. Now I know I've been alluding to these contract cards several times throughout the video so far, so now is the opportunity for me to talk about them. Now this is simply, is you plus contract card, you get to take any one of these three contract cards that are face up and available to you. And now let me show you how this contract card works. So say for example we take this contract card right here. The contract card is broken into two different areas. You have the top area here, which is your end of game bonus for victory points. And so this here is something you want to consider for your end of game scoring. And this simply means is if you have this card in your possession at the end of the game and you have 3 tracks that have been laid. So again, you look back here, this particular track was laid by yellow, and that would be 1. If he had 2 more cards that have been flipped over where he actually successfully laid track, well then he would meet this requirement, and at the very end of the game that would be worth 24 victory points. So it's pretty neat because not only does the actual process of you actually laying the track give you victory points, so you recall this example over here, you got 4 victory points, but you also can start getting these bonuses by paying attention to the contract cards that are down here. So you always want to be watching this and seeing what your long-term strategy, your end game situation is going to be like, because you want to capitalize on these different bonuses that you might be able to get, because this is where the game is won or lost in my experience anyhow. But below that, in the second box, you will have an in-game benefit, something that might benefit you throughout the actual play of the game. And this particular card actually allows you to kind of forfeit the actual train maintenance step, which is in fact one of these events that actually happens down here. And again, I'll talk about events in a second. So it's a really nice balance between trying to find an end game scoring bonus that's going to be really beneficial for all of the different actions you've been taking, and also being able to find something that will help you throughout the game. So the contract cards are set up quite simply, those 2 different steps, and each one of them has different benefits that you can go through. And finally, and certainly not least, we have the G area, which is where you actually move your surveyor. Now, what is your surveyor? Well, you'll notice down here at the station at the very base of the mountain, this Landberris, everybody has another pawn that looks like one of their laborers placed in this spot here. This is your surveyor. This is the guy, he's going ahead of the action. Well, sometimes he's going behind, it just doesn't matter. But he's the one that's going up the mountain and he's surveying, he's scouting it out, he's checking it out. And so by putting one of your laborers here, and again, this is the only spot that is not limited to who can go here. Everybody can go here on their turn. There's no squares inside there. By putting your laborer here, you get to move your surveyor and you get to move him to the next available station. And if you were to take this action, whoops, I should match up the colors there, I guess, so that he'd move him there. And then if you were to take this action another round, then he'd move to the next station, and then so on and so forth. You take the action again, and then he'd move up to this station. And so he can move all the way up to the mountain until finally he gets, say, up to the tippity top here. So you might look at this, go, well, this seems kind of like a pass action. It is not. It absolutely is not. But this is a strategy that you need to commit to early in the game, and you need to stay committed to it. And the reason why is because your surveyor will actually score you victory points at the end of the game based on the station that he made it to. So at the very beginning, he's at the base, and there's 0 victory points associated with that. He hasn't done anything, so you shouldn't be rewarded for that. But then if you get to the second station, you'll see here again, we got the little binocular icon right here, which is the same icon as the actual action space, and it's only worth 1 victory point. So if you have your surveyor up here at the end of the game, you will get 1 victory point because he didn't really make it that far. And then when you get to the second station, it's only worth 2 victory points, and then 4 victory points. So you've already taken 3 actions just to get 4 victory points. That's not a lot. That's not a great payoff. You're only getting 1 and a bit to 1 1/3 points per action. It's not a big payoff. But it grows exponentially till finally you get to the last station here, and it's worth 21 victory points to you to have your surveyor there at the end of the game. So if you count the number of stations that you'd have to move, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's 7 actions that would take to get the surveyor to the top. Now that's an average of 3 victory points per action. And now it's worth your time to do that. So this again is something you have to be consistent with and persistent with throughout the game in order to get the payoffs that you would like to get for it. But it is certainly not a pass action. So don't confuse it as that. It is something that if you're going to commit to, you need to, and you definitely want to get your surveyor as high up the mountain as you possibly can if this becomes a part of your strategy. So those are all of the different actions you can take and how you can actually earn victory points or build your strategy based on any one of those actions. So I hope that is clear. Now, if you'll indulge me, I want to take a look back at these contract cards, because not only do they actually have these cool in-game benefits and end-of-game scoring bonuses associated with them, they are also what controls the weather. Because if you look at the back side of the cards, you'll see that some of them show foggy weather, some of them show sunshiny weather, and some of them are just these crappy rainy days. And this is how the weather is actually controlled in the game. And I'm bringing this up now because after everybody has resolved their actions, it's the end of the round, you will actually do several different things. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to restock the contract cards. So say, for example, this was the current situation that you had. This card would slide up and it would be flipped face down. This becomes now the discard pile. These two cards slide over, and this card now becomes a contract card that will be available for the next round. So by restocking the contract cards, what we've also done is we've now revealed a different weather card on the top of the contract card deck. So this next weather that's going to be coming in will be a sunny day. And if you follow the progression of weather here, you see that we have a sunny day here, then a sunny day here, followed by a rainy day. And that's in fact the next thing we're going to do. We are going to check the weather. So in doing so, we slide the weather cubes up these sunshines to see what's going to happen. And you always resolve this leftmost or topmost sunshine where there's an exclamation mark there. So we see now that it's a rainy day. Boo! And there's a cool little chart here that shows you what happens on any one of the three different weather patterns that come through. So on a rainy day, we go back up to these two tracks here, our excavation track and our track laying track. Both of them get reduced by one level. So we slide this black disc 1. So now if you were to take the excavation action the next round, you could only remove one rubble, and the laying track action, you'd again lay one track, because again it's 1, 1, 2, 2. Then you would take this weather cube and you remove it, and then you would take a sunshine weather cube here and you add it to this space, because that is what this card is showing. And the cool thing about this now is it tells you that the next 2 days are going to be sunshiny days, and on the sunshiny days your track goes up 1, but your clearing rubble, your excavation marker, goes up 2. And so you can see that there's going to be some great times to build, maybe not the next round, but the second round from now, because then the track will go up 1 and this will go up another one. So this will be up, and then this one goes up, and then that's where we'll be. Is then there'll be some great opportunities now to lay track, because now you can lay 2 tracks, and so you get more efficiencies built out of your action here if you took the track laying action here. So it's really neat. I love these games that have this weather component into them. Another game that I really enjoy where you really have to watch the weather and it affects your strategy and it affects the timing of your game is K2, because you have all these different layers on the mountain where sometimes there's a storm blowing through at the top of the mountain, so you got to duck down to the mid part of the mountain before that storm goes and try to reach the summit the next time, even though you're available maybe that round. And I'm digressing here, but it's a really cool mechanism that's done here. Now at the very beginning of the game, if I just rewind, the way that the weather is set up is you just simply flip these 2 cards over and then you put these discs in place. So if you'll recall, I actually had a rain disc here because that was this card, and I had a sunshine disc that was right there. And then you flip these back over and you're ready to play the game. So that's the weather. Now after you check the weather, then we come back to the stockyard and we have to restock it. Now this to me is one of the key things that separates this game, and one of the reasons why I just love the kind of push your luck and some of the anxiety that this game creates for me, is it separates this game from a lot of other worker placement games. This to me, what I'm about to show you, is one of the coolest things in this game. I don't know if it is for other players that have played, but for me it is really neat. And the reason being is you are going to restock the stockyard with all of the resource cubes that have been placed in this black bag. So we have the starting resource cubes, which have been shown throughout the video, but then depending on the number of players that are playing, you're going to put additional iron ore, stone, and coal cubes into this black bag. But you're also going to put white cubes that are going to control the different events that are going to occur, which I'll talk about. So what's really neat about this is when you restock this area, you have to pull a certain number of cubes out of this bag, and it's player number dependent. So for a 3-player game, and again, here's a nice little thing that shows you, we have to draw 9 cubes. So what you do is you just kind of shake through, you choose 9 cubes. I'm not really looking. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You choose your 9 cubes, and what's neat about this is then you'll be left with a bit of a surprise. There's no consistency to the number of resources that are actually going to be put in play. And again, you'll notice here, what? No coal? What if somebody took this coal before because suppose they had a train and they wanted to activate their other laborer, and then you wanted a coal because you wanted to do that as well? Well, then there would be no coal for you. So then it's really kind of you're sitting there, you're anxiously watching the player take it out like, oh, what's it going to be? What's it going to be? And so here you put the resources where they belong. But you'll notice here that I also have a white cube. Now this is awesome, because what this does is this represents an event that's going to occur. So again, we look down at this event track, and this white cube would go here, and it's going to fill up from left to right. And if you get all the way to the right, then it's going to start cycling in the last 3 spots here near the end of the game, which keeps the pressure on. So what does this do? Well, first of all, there's another really handy dandy card that comes with the game that explains each of the events in details. And I typically put that right here on the board so that people can kind of look at it, especially if they're not very familiar with the game. But what's cool about this is this provides a driving force, a driving mechanism behind the game. Because this first one, for example, you'll notice the shovel. This is, again, the excavation. Now, what this does is there's another kind of ghost player, if you will. There's another company that's much more efficient than you who is also working on Snowdonia. And when you get, say, something like this, for example, the excavation, you go look at the excavation rate here, and again, let's put it back to the 2s, pretending we're at the start of the game. What this means is that you have to excavate 2, but not 2 rubble, 2 cards. And so then here we had this 1 rubble left over here, and then you would take away all of these rubble cubes on the first excavation site here of that station. That's 2. And so you can see that, say for example you get that and it was sunny, and you know maybe your excavation rate had gone up a little bit. If that was at 4, then he would have taken this and this in addition to that. So it starts flying. It really adds an acceleration to this. So then as you continue to get resources, there are additional white cubes that are actually in this bag, and it's defined by the number of players. For 3 players and beyond, there are 5 white cubes that are actually in this bag. So sometimes you might pull out 2 cubes, sometimes you might not pull out any white cubes, and then it'll allow you to do different things. And it's not until the second event occurs that players are actually allowed to buy their trains. And so you actually have to wait for that event to occur to buy a train, and then when we get to the third event, which is lay track, it works exactly the same as the excavation, but we look over here, we look at the lay track rate, and here it says 1, is then you would actually just flip over one of these cards, and nobody gets the victory points for that. That is just this other ghost company, if you will, just laying track up the way. And they also do not have to worry about any rubble that's on there. Suppose there was still 3 rubble on there, they don't care. They would clear the rubble first, and then they would lay the track like that, and then nobody gets those points. And again, that causes an acceleration, because suppose part of your strategy is, say you got one of these cards like this, which I pointed out earlier, and you need to be laying track. Well, if you're not on it, and these events are starting to occur, because when you start seeing here at the end of the game, you got the excavation and the lay track, and they will just cycle back through and through and through. It just flies by, and there'll be a lot of lost scoring opportunities if you let that get out of control. And then we have what's referred to here as basically complete a station immediately. And what this means, you see you got the station symbol here again, is suppose you have this station here and it's not completely built up or consumed by players' markers. So as long as there's still some empty spots on that station, so this station here is not yet complete because there's some empty spots, then simply all you would do is on the next available station, you put one of these black markers on there, and this means there can be no more building done on this station. If you're going to do any more building, then on stations, you need to go to the next station or the next station, provided that the rubble has been cleared as I described earlier. So again, that provides this constant foot on the pedal, this acceleration to the game where you're always trying to manage it. And what's really cool about how these events are done with these white cubes that are drawn randomly out of this bag is sometimes you're really pushing your luck because you're like, oh, I need to take that action. There's a really juicy, 7 points here if I trade in a steel bar. I need to get that done before the station is complete. Hopefully there's no event pulled, and you're kind of like it's a really anxious moment. And honestly, for me, this is just, I love this component to Snowdonia, and I'm going to stop gushing about it because this is just absolutely brilliant. The next brilliant thing that was done, as I mentioned before, there's only, for 3 players and beyond, there's 5 of these cubes in the bag. But once you fill these cubes up and you get to this particular spot, you'll notice that there are, shows you 3 cubes back in the bag. Then you simply leave this cube there, pick up the first 3, and then throw them back in the bag. And the neat thing about this is if you have, let me just find the white, and a couple white cubes. If you have these 3 cubes out here, then you know that there's only 2 other white cubes in the bag. And that's a great time to start diluting those white cubes by spending more resources, maybe taking this exchange more often, getting more of these cubes back into the bag, so that hopefully you could just leave these here for a long time and you can continue to work on things and get your own scoring opportunities. But then as soon as you get that 4th one, boom, then these get thrown back in the bag, and then the concentration of them has gone up again, and the likelihood of you get these next things is higher, and it might accelerate faster than you, and it just becomes this balancing act, and it's really quite interesting. The only other different event that I need to talk about is this one here in the middle. If you did purchase a train somewhere between the second event and this event, there will be a maintenance phase that you have to go through. I talked a little bit about it with this card. You could skip, you'd use this card at that particular time, or you can just pay another steel bar, and then you can maintain your train, and you get to keep the train for the rest of the game. On the topic of trains, I should also mention that each player can only have 1 train in their possession at any one time, but should you go back up to this build a train action again and you have a train and you want to get a different train, then you can just simply exchange the train that you have, pay the cost of the new train, and get that back into your playing area. And alternatively, if the train that you're exchanging comes with coal, if there's any coal left available in the bag, then you take that coal and you put it back on the train for another player who might want to purchase it later. So that is Snowdonia. The game will continue until this track has been laid, the very last track next to the station at the very top of the mountain. The round that this track has been laid, you complete that round, and then you'd finish by actually doing your end of game scoring. And the game comes with a nice little score pad here. You can put your name up through here, and these are the 5 different categories of things that you'll actually score, and then you sum them all up, and whoever has the most victory points wins. So as a summary, the first thing you're going to score are all of your ownership tokens that are on any one of the stations. So again, you look through at the stations and you just basically look at the victory points associated with any one of your cubes in the lower right hand corner there, and you just add them all up, and you leave your cubes there for the time being. You'll see why in a second. And you add them all up and you just simply write that value here. The second thing you're going to score is all of the track that you laid. So again, you'd go look here for example, yellow scores 4, and if you had any more, he'd sum them all up, and then he'd just write that value right here. And again, you leave your ownership cubes where they are. Now the third thing you're going to score are going to be your contract cards. Now, throughout the game, you're going to collect a whole variety of different contract cards. So here again are some different contract cards, and this contract card gives you, if you have 8 rubble cubes at the end of the game, you get 11 victory points. And here, if you have 4 rubble cubes plus 1 track laid, you get 11 points. So this requires a little bit of, kind of figuring out. You have to take a look at all your different ownership cubes that you have, your rubble and your area, and you're trying to figure out what's your best way to use all of the things in your possession at the end of the game to maximize your scoring, because often you're going to have a variety of different things and you won't be able to complete all of these different bonuses associated with them. So you're trying to maximize your points at the end, and this is the time in the game where you just simply take, for example, let me get someone here with a different, well here for example, here we got 3 different station cubes. So again, you look on the station and here you see you got 2 cubes here. Suppose yellow had another one over, or pink had another one over there, then you'd actually then just pick these 3 cubes off and put them on top of that card to show everybody that you actually have the actual resources to do that, and that'd be worth 6 victory points. So you'd go through all your different contract cards, and again here if you had 5 tracks laid out, so suppose yellow did have 5, then you just pick them up off your track cards and you place them like so, show everybody that you actually accomplished that. Then once you've done that, then you sum up all of these bonus points at the top of these contract cards, and you write that here on the score sheet here. So this is also where it becomes very important for you to be alert and aware of all of the different contract bonuses and what it is that you're actually doing on the board so that you can maximize these different bonuses. And again, as far as I'm concerned, that is where the game really is won or lost. Then we have this picture of this train, and this is that train that I showed you earlier. There's only one train in the base game anyhow that will score additional victory points, which is this one, which is 9. So only one person will be able to get that provided they bought it, so 9. And at the very bottom here we have your surveyor location, which I explained. So say if your surveyor was up here, blue surveyor, he would get 11 points for that because there's 11 points associated with this at that station. You write it there, you sum them all up, and whoever has the high score wins. So that's Snowdonia. Please stick around for my final thoughts. I do want to talk about the solo game, and hopefully I included a lot of my comments actually throughout my visual display here of the game, so you'll probably have a good feeling as to whether or not this game will work for you and your group already. But let's just try to sum it up here at the very end in a couple short minutes. Thank you. Welcome back. So thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Now let's talk a little bit more about some of my final thoughts, which are probably pretty apparent throughout the actual core of the video, but I also want to talk about the solo experience, which again, as I mentioned before, is one of my key motivations for wanting to make this video, because there was a solo challenge that was put out at Board Game Geek, and I thought, well, this would be a neat thing to do. I want to jump into this game, and a lot of people played a lot of the different expansions that exist out here, which again makes this game great, because I have a whole bunch of these different expansions. I don't even know what they're called anymore. I got the ones with the coffins in it and the wood in it, and I got the Mount Washington and Jungfrau. I got this expansion. And again, what's so cool about these expansions, and I mentioned it before, is that in order to change the actual experience of the game, you really only need to change the layout of the tracks and the rubble and kind of all the different benefits that go on out through there. And here what happens on the board, the core game, it remains consistent. So it allows them to make some really interesting expansions, in this one here with the little coffins on it, while still keeping costs relatively low, because all they're really doing is adding new cards. And I think that's just brilliant. But anyhow, I decided to play the solo experience as suggested here in the rule book. And if you go back, and it's got solitaire player on the last play, and basically what it tells you to do, it tells you to play a series of 7 games, each with a different starting train card. So you start with number 1 and you work your way through number 7. Now here was one of the big problems I had with the solitaire game that kind of kept me away from doing it, because at the very top it tells you, play this series of games using different train cards, check, each time to see if you can beat your previous score. What? And that for me, that was a showstopper for me a little bit, because to me that implied if I'm just playing the same game and I'm trying to beat my final score, either A, they're expecting me to become better at playing the solo game as I go, so by the time I've played it 7 times, I've sorted it all out and I've been able to work out the game, or B, each train is progressively better than the previous train. And you'd think, well, there's no way that could be, because then how could these possibly be balanced? And so for me, that was kind of a bit of a hesitation point, because I have done the solo experience in Agricola before, which I also know that designer is a big fan of. And the solo experience, I believe it's a series of 8 games that you play. But the key difference is that you need to beat your score each time, but you also get to keep one of your occupation cards each time. So you're able to build an occupation deck that really works for you and make it really efficient. So you're kind of building an engine from one game to the next to the next. Whereas here, when I kind of read that, I'm like, well, I'm not building anything. I'm just using a different train. And if I have an equal level of ability each time, like say, for example, I've already done the solo experience many times over, then that's a lot of pressure. And in fact, when I was going through the solo experience, by about game 4, I got really sick for a week. I'm like, oh, I can't do it because I won't be able to focus. I won't be able to beat my last score. Okay, that was that was the pre-solo experience, but frankly speaking, is after doing the solo experience, it's clear that each train is not better than the next. It just depends on what your strategy is going to be, what train will work best for you. So for that reason, I kind of wish that they took that out of the rules, because that's not the point of the solo experience. The point of the solo experience is be able to dive into the strategies and dive into what each of these trains can do, so then again, when you're playing this game with people, then you can actually kind of look at some of these and you can know immediately what cards do what and how it might affect your strategy, especially if you're getting pigeonholed or cornered into something. So my first solo experience was terrible. I scored, let me see here, I got it written down. I believe it was like 47 points. Oh, 57. Okay, I was being too hard on myself. And I thought, well, what's a good score? Because it doesn't tell you in the rules, well, what is a good score? You go online and you quickly learn that a good score is generally viewed as 180 plus, and an excellent score is viewed as about 200 points plus. So yeah, I had to eat some humble pie, but then that was because going back to the timing of this game, and this also goes into my final thoughts a little bit. When you are restocking your resources, you got a limited number of resource cubes that are available in this bag. And for a solo game, again, there's only so many cubes that are available. So when I'm playing a solo game, whenever there's an ability for me to upgrade resources or to do that type of action, I always like to maximize it. To me, that's the most efficient thing. But then what happens is then you start stockpiling these resources in your actual own playing area, and then that means that you're diluting the bag of resources and increasing the odd of actually getting an event cube that comes out. And if that happens, then this event track starts accelerating extremely fast on you, especially if you start hoarding the resources. And this is true for a multiplayer game as well. Once this event cube start accelerating on you, this game goes like, it just goes lickety-split. And if you're not on that, then you're going to find that the last part of the game just ends on you and you don't even know what happened. And since this alternative ghost company that's doing all this building at a better rate than what you can, you lose all opportunity, every opportunity to actually score points, and it sucks. And so that's what happened to me in my first game. I thought I was so clever, I thought I was going to be really efficient, but then this event track just got completely away from me, and it was just game over. But after that, I started using the trains, and I got better. It wasn't necessarily about using the trains so much as it was about managing these resources and managing this bag. Because what was really cool was once I started seeing multiple event cubes starting to pile up here, that's when I tried to keep diluting the bag back with resources and doing the exchange so that I could keep those event cubes out of my bag and keep my opportunities open and slow the game down and allow me to get some scoring done before the events all got dumped back in the bag and the game started accelerating on me again. So it provided a real nice ebb and flow and kind of a timing mechanism. And on top of that, you got this weather coming through. So on the second train, and the second train was quite an interesting train because it gave you a better efficiency rate for getting steel. Instead of trading 3 iron ore, you only had to trade 2. But it didn't come with any coal. And I scored 147 points there. So I was kind of happy with that because I was able to start building up a little bit of strategy, and I was able to start cycling these cubes a little bit more. But my downfall there was since I only didn't need so many of these actual iron ore cubes, they actually started accumulating here in this spot because I wasn't trying to take as many, and instead I was going more for the stone. But my downfall was I wasn't taking the build action very often, and so then I wasn't using up a lot of stone. And the neat thing about the stone is that when you upgrade rubble to stone, if there's no stone left in the bag, well, too bad, so sad, you can't upgrade the rubble. Like, you can't just pull it out of the supply from somewhere. You're limited to that. So you need to be cycling through that stone, and that's something I learned in the second game. So finally, in the third game, I used this particular train. Let me find it here. Is this one here, where basically what this does is, if you're taking action A, which allows you to pick these resources, I get 1 additional cube that I can pick up for any one of my laborers. And he also allows me the ability to move my laborer around. And this guy I really liked because I was starting to get used to this rhythm of trying to get as many resources as I could and use them to start building onto the stations and try to cycle them back into the bag, because that's the constant pressure with the solo game, is cycling these resources. You got to cycle these resources, and so if you're able to get more resources from one laborer, then it allows you to make that action quicker and be able to cycle it back into the bag. And so for that one, I was able to score 165 points. So okay, things are starting to look a little bit better. So now I'm starting to feel good about how I'm cycling my resources. I jump into and I use train number 4. Now train number 4, frankly speaking, to me this has got to be the most boring card. I looked at it and I didn't even want to play the game with this card. I kind of wanted to avoid it, but because, you know, internet pressures, I committed to it on a geek list. Well, of course I got to play. Is all it gives you is 9 victory points at the end of the game. Now this is a card that maybe you'd want to upgrade to if you had a different train, you know, throughout the course of the game that's actually allowing you to do different actions, and then you might want to upgrade to this right before the end of the game and give you your 9 victory points. But I wasn't looking forward to it in the solo experience, actually being stuck with just this one card. But anyhow, I took this card and I scored 199 points. What? Yeah, like it was crazy. But that was because the thing that I had learned at this point in time by my 4th game was these contract cards. So now you kind of see my progression as a player playing solo, is these contract cards, boy, these contract cards are awesome, because at first, when you first play the game, you're probably going to be focused mostly on what is the in-game benefit that you're going to get from this contract card. You're going to be focused on that. And then when it comes to scoring, you're going to be cobbling together whatever kind of stuff you have at the top, and it's going to be kind of a modge podge, like, well, I can take this from here, this from here. But by the time I got to my 4th game, I was very, very particular about which cards I was going to get, because I was really looking hard at the end game scoring and trying to maximize it, because I was trying to build my efficiency such that if at the end of the game I could score everything that my contract cards had, and maybe a few other things as well because they actually had really good in-game benefits, well then great, that would be awesome. And I found that this game where I got nearly 200 points, I was able to pick the right contract cards. And the other light bulb moment at this point for me was, there's not a lot of endgame scoring with completed station spots in them. And whenever I see these contract cards pop up, I look at them really closely, because you're always going to be scoring, or at least I was anyhow, always scoring and getting these different station spots and scoring points for them. So I was always looking for contract cards when they came available as to how I could actually double down and get additional points for that. And that for me was the management of the contract cards, is where I think I was able to score a lot better. I still made some mistakes, and the weather kind of sucked on some days, because what I found sometimes happen, I want to take an action and the weather was was rainy a few previous days, so I couldn't really do much with that. And then I'd have a few sunny days, and then my tracks, my excavation lay track would go really quite high, and then in comes the event where the guy comes and he clears 4 rubble cards for me, and you're like, how come you couldn't come after the rainy days? And then when the sun, so I had a hard time working the weather in these particular games. But oh well, that's another kind of cool thing. So we go on to the train number 5 here. And again, frankly speaking, this was a train after playing with the number 4 that gave you the victory points, I saw this one, I'm like, oh, this is now my least favorite card, because it's cheap, and it allows me to use an extra laborer, and it comes with 2 coal, but that's it. All it allows you to do is be able to get this extra laborer going. And I don't know, I wasn't enthused by the card, maybe my head wasn't in it. I just found that I couldn't duplicate my actual game from before, so I got 149 points, and honestly I was a little bit irritated at the end of that game. I don't like that train. It gives you an immediate benefit of 2 coal, but again in the solo game, the bad thing about that, the only reason why I took that is because in a solo game you only get 6 coal, counting the coal that's actually on your train. So that was, I needed to get those coal back in rotation. So that was basically the only reason why I was really excited about that, was to get the coal back in rotation and to get this extra labor. So moving on to solo game number 6, and this is where I used this guy here. And this is, he comes with a coal, and this one really bothered me. It took me to about mid-game to adapt to this card, and my final score was 174, which is, I was quite pleased with that. Because what this card has is, it's really expensive to get your third laborer, to get him out of the pub. Like this comes with a drunk. It's going to take you a lot of work to get this drunk out of the pub. But when you're doing a build action, this allows you to take another build action as if you had already put a laborer here. But the caveat to this is there had to be at least one build action taken. So if you're going to actually use the full benefit of this card, you're going to have put a laborer in there to take a build action to be able to trigger the benefit of this to get that second build action. So this was a pivotal moment for me, because this really helped me focus on building all of these stone areas on these stations. Because up until now, on most of the station cards, I was focusing on these steel bars. I liked them. They look sexier to me. I usually had lots of steel bars, and a lot of the trains I had helped me get steel bars more efficiently, and I was really focused on that. And I was always cycling through the iron ore to try to keep this resource bag full. So I was always focusing on the steel bars. But now, because of this, I was started to focus more on the stone. I was trying to cycle the stone through, because since it was a lot more expensive to get this third action or this third laborer out there, then I needed to figure out a way, well, how do I get that extra action? How do I get this extra action on my turn so that I can get more done? And the way that you're going to get an extra action is by taking this action E and then being able to get the benefit. So first of all, you need to take that action, then you need to have the resources available to pay for that action plus the bonus action. And so I found this really got me cycling through the stone, which was really neat, because up till now I was kind of avoiding that. So that really opened my eyes for that strategy. So it was great, and I was actually quite pleased with how that score turned out, because I didn't really start clicking till about a third to a half the way through as to that was the process I needed to be doing, and I think then I gave up some opportunities from earlier in the game. And finally, to the last game, or the last solo game here, was with Ralph here, number 7. And basically what this was, it comes with a coal, again lets you move your Surveyor up, is that whenever you take the lay track action, you get to take an additional lay track action. And honestly, I thought I was going to use this a lot, because typically I really like to focus on getting these steel bars, and that's what you need to do the lay track. The weather was crummy. The weather was really crummy, and so I was always down in the 1. And so whenever I was using the benefit of the station, I was only getting 2. Now this also allows you, if it's in to be able to lay 2 lay tracks, then you could also go beyond that and get 3 with this +1. And I couldn't do that. The one opportunity I had to do that, I didn't have enough steel, and there was also another time where the rubble hadn't been cleared, because the weather was so crappy that even when the events happened, nothing was getting cleared. And normally what I was hoping to do is kind of piggyback on an excavation event, where then the guy could go through and excavate, and then I could just go in and lay the track behind him and let the game do some of the work for you. And it just didn't work out the way I had planned, and I was pretty rigid in what I wanted to do. But I got 197 points on that game, and so I was quite pleased. That was my second best game of the whole solo sequence. So there you have it. That's kind of the summary of my solo experience. It's great for playing solo, but even if you're into delving into the strategy of a game that you enjoy, the solo experience with these different trains has just been really amazing for me. And maybe it's something you might want to consider as well if you're a fan of the game and you want to jump more into how these trains can be used and how it might impact your strategy. Because maybe you're pretty focused as to how you approach this game. This forces you to change your focus and be open to more strategies. Now, that was just this one base game. I could do the same thing with any one of the expansions. So just from a solo play, there is so much replayability in this game. It's amazing. So I had a great time doing the solo challenge. I really thank the person who posted this on Board Game Geek to kind of kick me in the butt to do it. And I hope you kind of enjoyed my walkthrough of my experience of the solo challenge. Now I'll just do some final thoughts for real this time. Okay, so I'm done rambling on about my solo experience, and so I'll make the final thoughts really quick because this video is already way too long. This game is great. what makes this game great for me and what separates it away from any other train game or worker placement game is this little bag right here. The way in which the resources are cycled through this game and how the events are actually created throughout this game. It's not like you go to the end of a round, you flip an event card and you resolve that event, and you flip the event card and you resolve that event, and it's a very static thing that's going to happen, and that becomes predictable, and you know what events are going to happen when. And no, this is completely random, and there are times when you are just pushing your luck and trying to go, oh, I think that bag is diluted enough right now that I think there's not going to be that many event cards. Maybe I could wait till my next round to do that, and then and it just causes this tension and this kind of uncertainty in the gameplay. And for a game that plays the length that this does, it's an average length game, I'd call it, 90 minutes for a full suite. I like that. That moment, and when you're just sitting there and you're just watching so intensely when like the player is pulling out the cubes and you're come on, or there's other times where you need that event to occur because maybe you're in the best position for that event to actually occur, and you know it's going to actually harm somebody else more than it's going to harm you, so you're kind of like, come on, let's get an event, or you're trying to drive to the end of the game. This mechanism, this part of the game for me is just absolutely brilliant. And I love how the event cubes drive the game. I love how the actual different events push the game forward and forces you to keep moving, keep driving with the game, because it provides a clock, it provides a way to keep the game in a short period, and it also allows you the opportunity to try to piggyback off some of these events to actually do your own thing. And that provides a really neat wrinkle for me, and I just absolutely love it. The second thing I really enjoy is this weather component, because again, you're not just, a lot of worker placement games, you're just trying to take a spot away from somebody or try to take something that's most advantageous to you, and that's kind of the interaction that occurs, where I love it when the game interacts back with you. So again, not only with these events, but with this weather. So this weather, you're going to see the weather that's coming through, and you can start building that into your planning, going, you know exactly what's going to happen in the next 2 days. Will that change your planning at all? Will that change your strategy? But more importantly, will it also change the strategy of the people around you? Because if it is, and you're all fighting for the same thing again, then you get back into this whole blocking situation that occurs up where your workers go. And so then maybe you want to try something different or change your strategy a little bit. And then you start looking at the trains to see how a new strategy might be able to be adopted with maybe a different train. And that level of interaction, that's not just with the players, but with the game speaking back to you with this just kind of, this little wrinkle, it's really great. And I mentioned it in the video, I mentioned it again. Another game I love with the weather patterns is K2. Same thing, you got a plan, but then all of a sudden the weather, you can see the weather pattern a couple days ahead of you. Then you have to change, you have to adapt to that. And I think that is just absolutely great. Another point that I think is great about this game is they've clearly spent a lot of time worrying about how this game will scale. I've enjoyed this game from solo to 5-player. It plays excellent with all levels because they've taken the time to adapt the game, and you can make certain modifications. In fact, when you play, I believe, with 4 or 5 players, there's an additional station that's added. They've added the components so that it scales very well, and that's really important for a game like this because it's really nice to have a game that you can enjoy with 5 as much as you do with 2. And one last thing that I wanted to mention about this, going back to these contract cards, is one thing that I think that Tony Boydell, the designer of this game, does quite well, is I like his style with these types of cards, because another game that he has, I've done a video on, and I actually quite enjoy, is Ira the Engine. Now, Ira the Engine is another train game, but it's based on the Ira the Engine comic series, or in the UK. But what's really cool about in this game, again, he has these different cards, and they're broken up to basically you can either choose to do an immediate in-game benefit, or you can actually do something at the top which will help you earn victory points and earn your way to victory. So again, he's got this kind of two parts of the card which you can, and in this particular game for Ira the Engine, you can actually use this card for one or the other, whereas in Snowdonia you can use the card for both an in-game benefit and an end-of-game scoring. And I like how he does that. I love the decisions and attention that's provided by cards that are laid out this way, not only with some thought as to what to do for the end of game, but then also some thought for how is this going to help me right now. And then similarly in Ivor the Engine, you have on a lot of these cards are actually laid out next to the board, so you have to make a choice as to which one is best for you. And here in Snowdonia, you have 3 laid out, and you got to make a choice as to if any of these are good for you or none at all, because it's going to take up a pressure labor placement action to actually get one of these cards. But he does this really well. If you like Snowdonia and you like this part of the contract cards, then I highly would recommend Ivor the Engine as well, because he does this really well, where he takes these cards and he makes you go, oh, you know, do I use it for this, or do I use it for that, or in Snowdonia, where just that extra levels, or can I use it for both? And I like that. I like that, how that will add to your decisions and perhaps alter your strategy a little bit. So I've talked way too long about this. This is a great game if you have not already experienced it and you are into worker placement games, and if any of this has resonated with you or you think it might work for you and your game group, that's great. If there are other things like this that resonate with you, say I don't like that part of the game, well then at least now you know and you can make an informed decision. If you like this video or want to see more of what I do, please check me out on Facebook, Connect More Board Games, or on YouTube. Please subscribe to both. I'd love to see you for the next one. Until next time, cheers and happy gaming.